Today's my mum's birthday. I get on really well with my mum. Love my mum. She really shone in my early years when I was preschool age. She was always patient. She was warm. She was really good at not reacting dramatically to anything. That was her way of managing our anxiety and my ups and downs of emotions in that age. I remember running in to Mum, who always seemed to be in the kitchen. That was her hangout zone, whether she was cooking or whether she was sitting at the table in her tall bar chair, sipping a cup of tea and reading the newspaper. She always seemed to be there. I remember running into the kitchen one day and I'd been playing with my older brother. We'd had some kind of argument and I came into Mum, whether it was Alexander's annoying me or whether Alexander hit me. She would ask me, oh, have you forgiven him? Which I don't know about the theology of that, but it prompted me to think about conflict between myself and my peers as this is something that I have agency to deal with. This is something I need to learn to deal with myself, and Mum isn't always just going to solve my problems. So today's Mum's birthday, but there's one problem with the picture I'm painting, and that is that Mum died this year. And as I'm training my own boys, I'm constantly reminded of little phrases she would say. I try to emulate her in a lot of ways. And although God has given me other women in my life to counsel me in this time in my life, I often wonder what my mum would say. I wish I could ask my mum how she potty trained us. I wish I could ask her how she kept us outside all the time so that her kitchen was always a haven from the craziness. And on top of missing her, because I like to be systematic in how I train my children, I wonder how much of my grief is it right for me to expose my children to, and under what circumstances. My name is Eliza Southwell, and this is how I train my children well. So, my mum was sick for a long time. She had Parkinson's. She developed Parkinson's long before our boys were born. I remember when Montgomery was a couple of months old, she came to visit us. We lived over 1,000 kilometers away from her, and my parents came to visit us, and we put Montgomery in her arms, and she could hold him, but only for a few minutes. It tired her quickly. That was a really special moment for me. When I was a child, I knew I wanted to have a big family. I knew I wanted to have kids because I could see how much joy my mum got out of it. We used to talk about how she would hold my children and how she would teach them how they would look after her and do her dishes and her laundry when she was old. And I'm really grateful that she got to hold our 2 boys before she died. If you've ever been close to anyone with Parkinson's, you know that it can be really frustrating. People with dementia usually lose their inhibitions, so that if they have a thought that's unkind, that usually they would have been polite enough to not say out loud, well, they lose their capacity to filter. And Mum was the kind of person that never made an enemy anywhere. People thought she just didn't have strong opinions about anything because she was so diplomatic and gentle in the way she expressed herself. So she found that aspect of Parkinson's absolutely mortifying. She had a lot of self-awareness, which we worked to give her, to support her in. But my boys never had any exposure to the real mum who raised me. And really, Montgomery's only memories of her are on her deathbed. We took some videos of her and some pictures of her with the boys, which I wish we'd done more of, so that they could get a sense of her personality. Mum went downhill fast at the start of the year, and I started crying a lot more. I started telling Montgomery, who was 2.5, when we would drive past a cemetery, I'd tell him what it was. Just like I'd tell him what kind of shop Bunnings was. I would tell him, that's a cemetery. That's where people are sleeping, waiting for Jesus to come back. When Jesus comes back, he's going to wake them all up. Some to everlasting life, and some to everlasting shame and contempt. Which sounds like a bit of an extreme thing to tell a 2.5-year-old, but it's a Bible verse. He can learn what that means gradually. But I think it's important to expose them to truths, even if they can't fully understand at first. So when Mum died, we told Montgomery that she'd fallen asleep. I don't know when the right time is to have those conversations, if not when he asks. So when I would tell my friends at playgroup my mum's dying, he would have questions about that. What does that mean? And ask me to repeat myself so that he could understand it better. I would say grandma's brain has a disease that means that her brain has decided that it's time to sleep. And her body is working. Her body doesn't want to sleep, but her brain says it's time to sleep. So when Mum died, Montgomery knew grandma's asleep and nobody can wake her up. But there's one person who can wake her up, and that's Jesus. It was important for me that Montgomery knew that. So those are the words I used to express that to him. So as I said, I cried a lot. I didn't really make any effort to shield Montgomery from my tears. Looking back, I think he would have been frightened if he'd seen me crying hysterically. But when I was crying hysterically, I don't think he was around. And even if he had been around, there wouldn't have been anything I could do to manage him and to move him somewhere else. You're just not able to do that if you're crying hysterically. But I would often cry in the car with him. We'd often have these conversations when we were in the car, whether we were driving past a cemetery or it was just something he was thinking about. What I've found in my grief is that whenever I have a new thought about Mum, or I have a conversation about a different aspect of her or our relationship, then the tears come again. Montgomery also saw me active at the funeral, and then at the graveside he saw Mum's coffin go into the ground. We didn't invite him to an open casket. That's not really in our family tradition. I was concerned that I didn't want his last image of his grandmother to be when she was dead and heavily made up and smelling like preservatives. He has so few memories of her. But I didn't hide my tears from him. He would ask, "Why are you crying?" And I would say, "I miss my mum. I miss grandma." And I'm crying because I won't see her for a long time. I won't see her until Jesus comes back and wakes her up again. So now we call her Grandma in Horsham, where she's buried. I told Montgomery that she's buried near her mum and her dad, and that when Jesus comes back and wakes them all up, she will be right there with them. And I asked him, "Do you think she'll give them a big hug?" And he said, "Yeah, I think she will." Because she died when Montgomery was so young. They had an unusual relationship. Her walking was poor. I told Montgomery that she was wobbly and that she was in bed all day because she was too wobbly to walk around, because they didn't have much of a relationship for Montgomery to look forward to renewing in heaven. I told him that in heaven, Grandma is going to play soccer with you. And his eyes lit up. He was very excited by that. That's something that he comes back to when I'm crying again. Also, something positive that I've seen come out of the way I unashamedly cry in front of him is that my husband is teaching him to comfort me. So part of this is self-led from Montgomery, and then part of it is encouraged by my husband. Montgomery will come up to me and give me a hug or maybe a kiss, and he'll say, "Don't worry, Mum, Jesus can wake her up." And sometimes it's really sweet. And then other times, his speaking truth into my life is so powerful that the tears get bigger and louder, and it's such a blessing. Part of me thinks, oh, I shouldn't let my young children see me emotionally out of control. I think that might be frightening to them. That'll be a big deal for them to see someone who's usually in command crying. But then another part of me thinks Montgomery needs to know that it's okay to cry. And Montgomery needs to know that this is one of the ways that we express that we love someone and we miss them when they're gone. And when he asks me, "Why are you crying?" what else am I supposed to say? "Oh, no, I'm not crying." Colossians 3 verse 9 says, "Don't lie to one another, since you've put off the old man with his deeds." I'm not sure that I have a huge amount of control over who is around when I'm crying, unless I were to change my character and make crying more performative and toughen up, you might say. That's not something the Holy Spirit's calling me to. But if the question is then, okay, Montgomery sees me crying, how should I train him to respond? Then he can respond with something like Romans 12:15. Rejoice with those who rejoice, weep with those who weep. He has been really good at sympathizing with me and comforting me and speaking truth into my tears. Because Montgomery knows all this stuff about cemeteries and death, he does bring it up, and sometimes with other people. And because he's 3, he doesn't always bring it up in the most empathetic and thoughtful and gracious way. So it can be a bit shocking. If I find there's something not quite right with what he's saying, then maybe it's an issue of correcting the truth of what he's saying or making it more nuanced. Or maybe it just takes from me a recognition that he doesn't miss her like I do, because he didn't know her like I do, because 3-year-olds have different kinds of relationships with people. Ecclesiastes 3 verse 4 says, there is a time to weep, and a time to laugh, a time to mourn, a time to dance. And if there is any time that is the time to mourn, surely it is when your mother dies. And I think if there's one way that I can honour my mum today, it's by doing this. I'd love to hear your own thoughts for those of you who have had small children while managing your own grief, how your children ended up exposed to that one way or another, also how you train your children to engage with others who are grieving. Even on a topic like this, I am interested in criticism if you can give it to me from scripture or scriptures other people have thrown at you, whether graciously or not. I would love to hear those. That's all for today on The Well-Trained Child.